Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us, Ed and I. I had to,
Uh,
Ed. Yeah.
I know you did. When we were getting ready to record, I was thinking about like I gotta mention like here we're really fortunate that like people reach out. You mentioned it in the last episode where we had
Yeah.
Jess. Like people reach out and like want to be on the show, and like that's really cool. We feel really fortunate that we can have such amazing, cool guests that have such cool stories to share. But it's also just really fun when it's the two of us, like you
Yeah.
mentioned with your song. So I'm excited. I missed. Obviously, I've seen you every time we record, but I missed you. Just have you all to myself.
Yeah, well, it's been a while because I did the
Yeah,
music episode and then two
yeah.
guests, and so yeah, it feels nice being back in the
We took
saddle
a break.
again.
There's like 2 months. It feels like.
Yeah, it has been.
And I can say it feels like, but obviously, like we can like fact check. But we're not gonna do that. We're just gonna
Nope.
say it feels like 2 months.
Yeah, and yeah, my life was kind of hectic too because I was moving and I was like living with my parents for a month and I was using someone else's equipment. So sorry that my sound quality was. All you listeners out there who really much value the sound quality, sorry it was bad, and it was.
But we're back, just
But
the
we're
two
back,
of us.
baby.
Done living at mom and dad's basement. Uh, Gets to just be with Dana and Liam. We're
Hmm.
back to normal. Uh, what do I want to start with? I know you have a shout out. Do you want to go first and then I'll go after?
Yeah, so I officially started my new job and big fan of the Cheyenne Regional Medical Center marketing department. They were really fun to work with, and we like recorded a couple videos together. I told them if they listened to the podcast that I would shout them out. So if they don't listen to this episode, then I just look like a complete idiot.
And we will cut this out from any further any future uploads. Uh, my shout out is to my friend Mike Fetch. I don't know if I told you this, Justin, but he's actually been a listener of the show since like the beginning.
Cool.
Um, Even early on when my mic sucked and we were just trying to figure this out, like he's been listening and he texted me. It's been now like 2 months. Whenever the Titan submarine thing happened, is right around the time he texted me, basically asking about like the psychology of humor and like why we laugh at certain things, even when they're like catastrophes. And I'll talk about it here in a little bit. But he pitched the idea. I thought it was great. We got the episode written, but then we had that little bit of a break. We've had guests. We've been sitting on it for a couple months, so I'm excited we finally get it to record it. With that being
Hmm.
said, though, we also want to shout out our friend of the show, Jamie Mailer. She was on the show actually about a year ago in September. She has her own show called the Unlearned Podcast. I know they recently did an episode on humor, and we just thought it'd be important to give you all a chance to hear it and know that it's out there. So we're going to add it to our show notes. Jamie's a friend of the show. She has a book coming out. I think we've talked about it. We'll have her on kind of in the near future when the book comes out. So she's a good friend of ours. Figured we'd share that with you all. But without further ado, we're just going to jump into it. I mentioned it a little bit, but yeah, we want to talk about humor, the psychology of humor. Why do we laugh at certain things? And really, as I was reflecting after Mike had reached out about the episode, just thinking about the last few years and how much it really has been like a fever dream, and feeling like it's just everything is kind of blended together. Um, it's been a shit show. Really, no other better way to describe it. It's been a shit show. With COVID, with trying to get back to normal, with all the things. And when I reflect, really one of the things that's helped cope with it is humor.
Hmm.
Back when TikTok was really taking off in 2019, I was definitely somebody who was a big fan of Vine. I would always watch Vines, the little 6 second videos. So TikTok was something that was like, this is close enough. The videos are a little longer. My attention span, I think, can make it. I'll watch it. And it was funny. And what I would do is I would watch the videos, I'd save the funny ones, and I'd rewatch them with Kevin, and like that was kind of our thing that we still do. Then when the pandemic hit, like it feels like TikTok really took off. Like there was nothing else to do. Like we were at home on our phones umpteen hours a day, just scrolling the TikTok. And there's a lot of things that just took off humor wise. Sometimes when I'm on TikTok, people will like post things of like sounds of 2020 or things that really like take me back to like when things were going on and really remind me of the time that we had to be at home. With that being said, I think it's also shifted our like collective societal humor. Things on the surface that really don't seem that funny are somehow like hilarious. back when I wrote the show notes, there was this like trend going around with Grimace. Did you see this, or have you heard of this, or is this like foreign to you?
Foreign to me.
And as I'm about to explain it, it's gonna sound really fucking dumb. But basically, at McDonald's, it was like Grimace's birthday. Apparently, Grimace's birthday is sometime in the summer. So what they did is they made a Grimace shake. No idea what flavor it was, just know it was a purple milkshake. And people would make these videos that would they would be like, "Happy birthday, Grimace!" Blah blah. Got the Grimace milkshake, and they drink it, and then it would cut to like the most like horrific, twisted horror movie scene with like this ominous music, and it like it was so weird. But I would like save every single one and show it to Gabby because I thought it was like kind of funny, but it was still weird. So I'm like, why am I even laughing at this? Along those lines, like even as a nation, like even with like nationwide and worldwide events looking really bad, people still find a way to make them like humorous. So when I wrote this, and I think where Mike really got the inspiration for pitching the idea was like the Titan submarine had just like
Mm-hmm.
exploded and had the whole issue, and it was catastrophic. Like it sucks on the surface, no pun intended. It's really not that funny that like 5 people in a submarine like lost their lives in like an extreme mistake, accident, whatever you want to call it. But TikTok and Twitter like did not stop from like making jokes, and there was memes and there was videos, and like that one incident like subjectively or objectively, like it made it like they made humor out of it. And I'm not afraid to admit that like I laughed at some of the stuff, like a lot of people did. Even more recently, from after we wrote the notes, there's that incident. I don't know if you heard about this, Justin. In Montgomery, Alabama, there was a boat incident where I think the basic premise was there was these people in like a smaller boat, and this big boat with people on it was trying to like park. Do boats park? They were trying to get to the dock, and the smaller boat wasn't moving. So the security guard came to tell them like, "Hey, you got to move." The people who were on the boat were probably intoxicated, were very rude. A big brawl took place, big fight. Well, all these people who were white, and this is important to the story, all these people who were white jumped out of the boat and started attacking the one security guy. So then all of these other people who were on like the other boat or who were near it, who saw it happening, and also the security guard was black. All these other people who were African American or black jumped out of the other boat, got on the dock and helped him and like tried to protect him. And like Twitter and TikTok turned this into memes and all these hilarious things. But really, if you think about it, Montgomery, Alabama and the South in general, historically, is not the nicest to black people or people of color. So like there's definitely like racial undertones with that situation. That part's not funny. The memes were pretty funny though, where like all these people got their ass kicked and there was like a chair involved and people were like, anyway. So it was a whole thing. But like, why is that funny? So long story short, long-winded monologue that I've had. Like, why are these things funny? Why do we as people, either for as long as we've existed or just more recently, why do we turn to humor to help us deal with uncomfortable and unfortunate situations? I don't think we knew before this episode. Hopefully by the end of it we have some idea, but I think it's important that we talk about it.
Yeah, and I always like starting off with a mindfulness question. What does humor mean to you? How do you use it in your life? Why is it important to you?
I mean, I feel like that's a huge part of my job. You know,
Yeah.
working with teens, like a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old off the bat is not just going to like open up and like talk right away, or like not every single one. And sometimes you need humor to open them up, to get them to feel comfortable. One line that I always use with kids, whether they come into my office crying or they're stressed or they're visibly just nervous, they'll come in, if they're pretty open and tell me what's going on, you know, I'll let them talk, let them get it out, and then I'll say something like, you know, we've known each other for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and I just really appreciate you feeling comfortable to share all that. And usually kids will laugh, give a little chuckle, and from there we're moving forward. So honestly, for me, like, humor I think is really important in work, outside of work, something that helps me de-stress. The TikTok videos that I watch at the end of the day with Kevy helps us de-stress. I think humor is really important, probably in all aspects of my life.
Totally. And yeah, I agree. Humor is like the ultimate vibe check, right? Or it's like if you could laugh with someone, it's like, okay, they passed the vibe check. I think I remember being young and the first time I really made my dad laugh, like from the bottom, like a solid guffaw. Like that was such a huge moment in my life. I was like, yes, I did it. I made him laugh. And then I realized like all my best friends, the reason why we connected so much was because of humor. Uh,
Yeah.
so humor is such a big part of human connection. It is something that makes us human. I researched this actually a couple of years ago. So this is actually probably about 10 years ago now because I'm getting old. But I remember learning that we're the only animal that like laughs, that uses humor because, that we know of at least. I mean, I guess technically marine mammals could, but like gorillas, like if you tickle their feet, they'll laugh. But they don't laugh with their communication, with their body language. So I think it's really interesting that this is one of the things that makes us human, and it's something that really unites us all.
Yeah. I also like how you said a couple years ago, and then he's like, ah, shit, maybe it's like 10 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
time just
Getting old.
flies. We're getting
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
Even though even though I brought it up, I was gonna say don't remind me, but I'm the one that brought it up, so never mind. With all that, we do have some stats and facts that we want to go over. I can take the first one. So in 2001, John Neslick and Peter Dirks, they conducted a study looking at the use of humor in social interactions in a person's daily life. So out of the 286 participants that they had, they found that people's use of humor as a means of coping with stress is positively related to how enjoyable their social lives are and to how confident they feel when interacting with each other. So basically the way I took that is if you use humor when you cope with stress, your life feels more enjoyable, and you feel like you can interact with people competently. You just feel better about how you interact with others. According to those researchers, compared to those who do not, people who use humor to cope may make light of their own problems, thus easing the burden experienced by others, and they may provide others with more palatable, so more humorous and less serious forms of support, particularly appropriate for minor day-to-day problems. Such ease and success may translate to the greater enjoyment and greater sense of confidence in day-to-day interaction. I was thinking of that as like maybe in like work relationships or work interactions,
Hmm.
being able to make like little things funny or like comical just makes things more enjoyable. I've been on teams where like nobody's funny and like it feels like the team kind of sucks. And I've been
Yeah.
on teams where like a lot of people are funny and like this is work's not that bad, even if it is
Yeah.
bad in the moment, even if it is stressful. But really, my main takeaway from this is people who use humor to cope end up using that in their interactions with others. This then has a positive impact on them, potentially impacting their use of humor to cope in the future. It then can spread to others from there. So if I'm someone who likes to use humor to cope, it can go to my coworkers or my friends or other people I interact with. They may be more likely to use it themselves in their life. They might be able to cope better with humor. It just kind of keeps passing on and on.
Cool. I bet you guys didn't think we'd be throwing so many like papers and research at you in a humor episode. But in 2005, there was an article that was titled "If We Don't Use Humor, or If We Didn't Use Humor, We'd Cry," where Wanzer et al. Examined the relationship between use of humor with nurses in the workplace. And the researchers found that through humor use, nurses had a higher chance of rating positively for overall job satisfaction because of their ability to cope better with the stress.
Next up in 2021, Dana Peters from the University of Helsinki in Finland. I don't know if I said that right, but it sounded
You
good.
did, yeah.
Did their master's thesis on the use of memes to cope with climate change anxiety. That's where we're headed. With
Yeah.
theses, dissertations, like very high level research. That's where we're headed. Looking at memes. Anyway, in their research, they found that while only a handful of participants actively sought out humor as a means to cope with climate change anxiety, a large number of them reported feelings of happiness, relief, reassurance, validation, or empowerment after looking at the climate change memes presented in the research. So they weren't like necessarily like, I need to find climate change memes to make feel better. They were just like, when presented, this makes me feel better, which then makes me think, when presented with anything funny or humorous, I could probably feel a little better.
I can't imagine saying that sentence though to someone 100 years ago. You're like, memes to help us cope with climate change anxiety. They'd be like, this witch doesn't know what they're talking about.
I feel like I don't know how many years ago, but someone had mentioned in school that like there's gonna be like a whole subsection of maybe not archaeology or like anthropology. I don't know what a lot of these ologies mean, but that like will need to focus on the use of like memes and emojis on like how people describe stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be like a whole section of school. You can take
Yeah.
entire college courses on it. It's like I have a minor in memology.
Where was that? I needed that. That would have been an easy minor. Could have doubled
I
my
know,
name.
right? All right, for our next and I believe final study, in 2018 by Nunes et al., examined the use of humor with grief. So, in the process of getting over loss. So, like the previous study we mentioned, the researchers looked at how humor was used as a coping mechanism with nurses who do death related work, and they found that humor helped ease the stress that comes with being in end of life or in palliative nursing. So, all of these studies are here to say that it seems like humor helps us cope. It seems like when we're using humor, we're a little bit happier, we're a little bit more understanding, and the stress of the world isn't as heavy.
Yeah. Even if it's only for like a little bit. Like even if it's like for 10, 20, 30 minutes whatever, like it's almost like taking a break from like everything that is in the world. Like there's so much shit going on. Even just thinking of this last week, like Mitch McConnell froze again, I think, in the news. Like that happened today. Donald Trump got a mugshot. That was pretty dope. I guess I'm not really choosing anything that's like that. I should have
But I
laughed at
mean,
Mitch McConnell freezing, but like that's another thing. 20 years ago, are people laughing at this? I don't know, but now, anything like that, I knew as soon as that video came out the first time, there's going to be so many like things about it on Twitter and TikTok. Like
yeah.
that's just the direction we're headed in.
And I loved that one video where they took Mitch McConnell freezing the first time, and as soon as he kind of starts staring off into the distance, you hear Simon and Garfunkel's Sound of Silence, where it's like, "Hello, darkness, my old friend."
That's what I'm
I mean,
saying. But, yeah.
it's a medical emergency, and they turned it into something really funny, and yeah, I guess it's a way to deal with it and process it.
And
But
trending, like it's something that like goes viral and blows up. Like, yeah. You mentioned like 100 years ago, like what would people say now? But what would 20 years ago? What
that's
would
true.
people say?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of this stuff was still brand new 20 years ago.
Yeah.
All right, we wanted to talk a little bit about like ego defense mechanisms since this is a mental health podcast. There are lots of ways that we deal with stress or attacks to our ego, like if someone makes us feel dumb, for example. But just because we love talking about Sigmund Freud on the show because he's great, and he wasn't obsessed with penises, but he actually made a lot of really great points that we actually still use today in mental health and in psychiatry. He developed this concept of ego defense mechanisms, and anytime there is something that hurts your ego, these defense mechanisms tend to come into play. Or honestly, if there's anything difficult that you have to go through. So even seeing something stressful or bad news or dealing with climate change, it might invoke an ego defense mechanism. And ego defense mechanisms are typically broken down into like immature, neurotic, mature, and some common immature defense mechanisms. So if you do any of these, it might be a sign that maybe you need some different defense mechanisms, but projecting or putting your feelings on other people. Like if I'm angry all the time, I say the world is angry all the time, which is not necessarily true. Or passive aggression is another immature defense mechanism. Acting out and denial. All of those are not seen as mature, as maybe not the best ways of dealing with stressors.
for neurotic mechanisms. We have obsessive tendencies, repression, dissociation. I was thinking about this earlier when we talked about you just recently mentioned like climate change anxiety and like or just dealing with stressors, and like the humor can like help stuff feel less heavy. And then I mentioned something about like, yeah, it gives us like a little break from the world. Like that's kind of like it, like dissociating a little bit. I remember one time I saw like a client or a patient years ago, who that was their thing. Like that was their defense mechanism. Like they would literally, when things got stressful in session, talking to one of the other providers, they would like dissociate right then and there, and they just wouldn't be present. And that was how they dealt with it. And now it was hard to watch, but also like it made sense. Like it basically gave you in your mind, if you can picture like a different room that you could walk into and shut the door behind you and like be safe, even just for a little bit when things are stressful. And then the last one from neurotic mechanisms is displacement.
Which I like to think of displacement as you're mad at your boss, so you take it out on your family instead. You're displacing that anger. And so we just like to talk about this stuff. And I think dissociation is interesting because it's seen as a neurotic mechanism, but I think a lot of times people use it as a last resort, where if you're in a situation where you cannot physically leave, you will mentally leave. And people sometimes do that to survive trauma situations. So in no way do we want to shame these defense mechanisms, because if you do dissociate, it's probably there's a good reason for it. But last but certainly not least, we have mature defense mechanisms. Number one on the list being humor. Humor is often seen as a mature way to handle with stressors. There's also sublimation, which the example I give for that is, say if someone is really mad at their father and they're really angry and they've got a lot of aggression, and then they tackle football to get out that aggression in a socially acceptable way. That's sublimation. We have suppression, where you hold down your emotions but then bring them back later to process them. And then altruism. And I've met a lot of people who have been through a lot of childhood trauma who then want to make the world a better place and do a lot of activism, help a lot of kids out, and that's altruism. So those are more of the healthy defense mechanisms that I hope it helps you understand and gain more awareness and insight into what you do under stress, and maybe give some ideas as to what you could do to be healthier.
I'm going to be vulnerable for a second to read passive aggression under immature defense mechanisms. I could definitely, I'd be doing that sometimes. I need to think about that. That's why we're here. We want information to be easily attainable and digestible. And if I'm learning something as we record, I feel like that's good, because hopefully that means other people are learning something.
I like it. I like your vulnerability, Ed.
Speaking of learning something, I'm going to have my own nerd alert real quick. Are you ready?
Yeah.
For this? Okay, here we go.
Lay it on me.
Back in middle school, when we were learning about... okay, I was about to say here's a nerd alert, now I sound like a dummy. What were we learning about? The states of matter, right? Liquid, gas, solid. You following me? Okay.
Yes.
Do you know that sublimation also means when a solid goes straight to a gas and skips the liquid part?
Yes, like dry ice.
Yes. Right? That was the example.
That was the example.
That's right. Let's go, baby. Thank you,
Also,
Miss Mitchell, 8th grade science teacher, Grand Middle School, Mountain View, California. Shout out.
Apparently, sublimation is also what's happening in my colon, because it turns from solids to gases without the liquid stage.
Okay, one last thing on sublimation. Let's move from the fart. In that class, for extra credit, my friend and I don't know how we did this, but we recorded a song about sublimation, but we did it to, this is going to be bad because I don't remember which band it was, either Backstreet Boys or NSYNC, Tearing Up My Heart, but we did it with sublimation and like that. So that got us extra credit. Just wanted to throw that out there. That's a little known fact.
Cool. Yeah, I thought for sure you were going to say POD's Youth of the Nation, and do like a sublimation instead of.
Uh,
Okay. Anyway. All right, we spent way too much time talking about. Moving on. Since you hit me with your sublimation nerd alert, I'll hit you with my own nerd alert.
Perfect.
Um, there is surprisingly little data out there on the science and neurology of humor, according to the American Psychological Association. It wasn't really until 2001 that scientists, Goal et al., used the functional MRI, the fMRI, to see what areas of the brain light up with humor. And a lot of the language processing areas light up when you hear a joke, so that makes sense. Your brain's got to process the language before you can actually react to the joke. And then if you see a funny cartoon or a funny meme, your visual processing area lights up. So depending on the medium of the joke, it might change the way you actually process it, which I find really interesting because I'm actually kind of a slow visual processor. And sometimes my wife will show me things and she'll say like, it took you so long to like read the whole joke and get it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I got a slow processing brain.
That's
I'm more of an
great.
auditory person.
Yeah.
Also, the nucleus accumbens in the reward pathway lights up. So, similar to what we've talked about on the show before, that dopamine lights up that nucleus accumbens, which makes sense. And so, we know the basics of humor, but we don't really know any of the specific brain areas. We don't know if there's any specific dedicated brain areas or nuclei or groupings of cells. And so, this is a relatively fresh uh, part of science. And so, I'm hopeful that in the future we start to learn more about this stuff because it's fascinating.
Yeah. I feel like I bring it up a lot, but like the presentations I give in the health class, like one of the things I talk about in the self-care presentation I give is talking about like uh, looking at things that make you laugh or smile. And like now
Yeah.
hearing this is like, okay, here's some science with it. I'm not going to use the science because it's high schoolers and they're not paying attention anyway, but it's at least backed up. So that's helpful. Oh.
We got a few discussion questions to end with here. Like, who are your biggest role models for humor?
Oh man, back in the day, it was my family and I really had like this not obsession, but like this fanhood for George Lopez. Like he had a
Yeah, yeah.
sitcom, like the George Lopez Show. We watched that. I remember a time where we'd go to my grandma's house every Friday, and we'd like watch it come out each week. And then his stand-ups, like I remember, back when getting an iTunes gift card, a $10 iTunes gift card, was like, man, I could buy 10 songs, or I could buy a whole album. I remember one time specifically, I bought a whole George Lopez like stand-up set, and I had it on
Nice.
my iPod. Now, like George Lopez is kind of a shitty person, so like I only share that because I can at least be like honest. Like that's where like it probably started. I think now Gabriel Iglesias is one that's really funny. He's a great
Oh yeah.
storyteller. Um, Ali Wong is hilarious. She says a lot of funny
Yeah.
shit. But yeah, I think probably those come to mind. Yeah, I'll stick with those. I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Final answer.
I like it. I'd say for me, it's interesting because you named off two Latinx comedians at the beginning
True.
and male as well. And almost all of my influences are white dudes. So it's like, that's the importance of representation and being able to see people who look like you and be able to shape your humor. But Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, those are probably my two biggest ones growing up. I loved them so much. A little bit of Adam Sandler here and there. More recently, John Mulaney. We got to see his stand up in Omaha, and he's
Yeah,
so funny.
yeah.
I'm talking about his rehab stay, his new special Baby J on Netflix. We got to see that one live, and he's so funny. He's so good. Um, yeah. How else? I know we talked about it a little bit, but how else do you think comedy and humor has changed? Do you think we're getting darker? What do you think?
Probably. I think so much like fucked up stuff has happened that like we got to figure out a way to cope with it, right? Like we were like indoors for like 2 years. We had like this big thing happen, and we needed a way to cope with it. I had a thought right as you were like reading that question. I think back when I was in high school, when I was a senior in high school. I've mentioned him before, but Mr. Cummins was my psychology teacher, one of my
Yeah.
favorite teachers of all time. And he talked about humor, and one thing, and I hope I'm not going to butcher it, but I'm pretty sure he said, like, what makes things funny is two things: understanding and incongruity. So basically, the
Hmm.
first thing is like you understand the situation, you understand the picture that's being painted, you understand what the other person's saying to you. Then the second part of incongruity is like there's something that doesn't fit, or there's something that like no longer like makes
Hmm.
sense or like goes with it, but I still understand it. And I feel like that comes up a lot with like I don't know, just the way like videos are made now. We get a lot of jokes and humor from short form videos on TikTok, or even like longer form on YouTube. Um, so I guess really to go back, I think it's changed. Yeah, we've probably gotten a little darker. Like that's just the world has seemed to gotten darker, so the humor has gotten darker with it.
Yeah, it almost seems as though because everyone has a voice now, everyone has access to the internet, we're all connected. We've seen the depths, we've seen how low humanity can go, we've seen how high humanity can go. But it seems like there's more anxiety and stress, and even the mental health of of the planet in general is getting worse, and it's coming out in our humor.
Yeah, we got
One,
some. Oh, go ahead.
I was thinking too, like, remember growing up in the 90s or in the early 2000s, how it was really a common thing for people to have movies that they quoted like all the time. Like it was Borat, Napoleon Dynamite, Anchorman, and Chappelle Show. Like
Yeah.
people would just quote those things all the time. It was a major part of comedy and humor, but it doesn't feel like people really do that anymore. Like those certain little viral um comedy auditory things aren't as popular. It seems like it has moved more visual, and its memes. Uh, I hate it when someone tries to describe a funny TikTok or a funny meme to me because it's like you kind of need to see it
Yeah.
and hear it, and doing it secondhand just isn't ever as good.
Yeah.
So it the way we're consuming media also is changing the way we're consuming humor, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember who said it, but there was like an actor recently who said like, I really miss those like B level or C level comedy films that would just come out every so often in theaters, and people would just like watch it, and the movie would be like an hour and a half long, and there was like a bunch of funny stuff, like Step
Yeah,
Brothers, the
yeah.
whole thing hilarious. The Hangover, same thing. There wasn't a whole lot of depth. There wasn't a whole lot of like character arcs, redemption arcs. Yeah, there was, but like
Yeah, in The Hangover there was.
that's
Yeah.
true. But yeah, someone mentioned it recently. Yeah, I think that's a good and accurate observation of needing to see things. Because actually, as I was saying my thing about like understanding incongruity, there's a couple
Hmm.
like videos I've seen recently that popped into my head that like I should describe it, and I was like, no, I shouldn't. It's not gonna be that funny.
Yeah, I wonder if this is going to lead to more generational gaps. Like our generation, who did kind of thrive on more auditory, more quoting things, it might be harder to connect with the younger generation who is more visual, who is more meme oriented. It's interesting to see where this takes us.
Yeah, yeah. We talked about it a little bit. You mentioned like, do you think our humor is getting darker? But do you think there are any topics that you think are like too taboo or like just shouldn't be humorized or made fun of?
Society says yes. I personally say no. I think humor is so important and that nothing should be above the level of humor because it does help us cope with the severity of the situation sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's why I very much value the relationships in my life where I've got old friends that I feel like I can say anything and everything and I won't be judged for it.
Yeah.
I won't be like, "Oh God, you can't say that." Because even though I might make a joke about something doesn't mean that like it's tough though because like I don't want to say racist
I
jokes
was
and
about to
stuff
say,
too.
Jesse, what are we?
But like there it seems like these days there is no joke acceptable about transgender people, or at least the ones that have been done have been like severely pushed back on. And I think it's important to be able to laugh. It's important to be able to joke about these things. And I don't think anything should be above the level. I think we should be able to talk and joke about race if it's done in the right way.
Mm.
But it's such a tricky thing. Yeah, what are your thoughts on it? There's no
Yeah.
great answer here.
I think I've seen it before where like comedians will have this stance where like nobody is off limits, but they do it in a way
Yeah.
that's not like. I'm not saying this because I want you to feel like the worst person possible. I'm making a joke either on stereotypes or generalizations that we can probably like laugh on, that we can
Hmm.
all find humorous. I think when it's like one of those things, I think the intent is really important. If the intent is to make people laugh and feel good and like have a good time, that's different than if the intent is malicious. You see these
Yeah.
like comedy specials that only air on fucking Fox News or whatever that are like, my pronouns are USA. I'm like, okay, fuck you. Like whatever, man. Or like Gen Z doesn't even know how to mail an envelope. Gen Z can't even write in a checkbook. And then people will take that
Yeah.
video and then put it on TikTok and then they'll like split it with like, me in the office needing to help my fucking company CEO create a PDF or like save to PDF. Like, I don't know. If the intent is malicious, then like that's an issue. If there's people who want things to be like comedians specifically, people who like their craft, like to be humorous, to make people laugh, to make people happy. I think I see your point on that. I
Hmm.
also think it's funny when you mention like society says like there are things that like are too taboo and should not be humorized. Society says that, but TikTok and Twitter like nothing is off limits, man. Like, they're making fun of everything, and I think that's probably the way things are headed, or have been headed, or probably have been
Hmm.
in that direction for a long time.
Yeah, and that's maybe one of the reasons why TikTok is so popular is because it does give people a platform to almost vote democratically with like, okay, what has good intention and what really is funny.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so we don't just have to take whatever humor. Like you made a great point. The intention is so important.
Yeah.
Me and my wife turned on a comedian the other day, and like half of her jokes were just complaining about how young people complain and they don't work hard enough. I was just like, this isn't funny. It's
Yeah.
just her complaining about the younger
Yeah.
generation. Like, and it was like, oh, this girl at Target is needed her break after her 4 hour shift. It's
Yeah.
just like, what are you doing? Like, are
Yeah.
you just you're putting down an entire you don't know what that girl's going through. So yeah,
Yeah.
I feel you, man.
I think too. It's what was I just thinking? It's the other piece to it, as you're saying, like they were just complaining of like if there's like no effort into it, if there's no effort to
Yeah.
like set a scene or anything, like, and you know what, this goes into our next question where it says like humor is classified as a mature defense mechanism. Can you think of
Hmm.
examples of unhealthy ways people use humor? I think exactly that. When there's like zero effort and you're just putting people down and you're just like getting the low hanging fruit, like that's like it's shitty. Like that doesn't feel
Yeah.
good. I feel like I saw a TikTok recently, and I'm gonna completely butcher the joke, but there's a comedian who was talking about, she's a comedian of color, and she was talking about how she had gone on a date with another woman, and they had gone back to a house and did adult things, and at one point she was saying how the person that she hooked up with was a black lesbian cop, and then she said, made a joke of something like, oh, like blue lives don't matter now or something, or like something along those lines, and it was like, she's like, if you really think about it, if I'm gonna hook up with a cop, at least it's a black lesbian. Like that's got to be the best one, right? Like stuff like that is
Yeah.
funny. But then the stuff where you're just complaining about young people, or you're just like acting old. And again, the one that gets me every time, the my pronouns are kiss my ass. Like fuck you,
Yeah.
Ted Cruz. Like you suck, man.
It's been a
That's
while since we've gone after Ted
it
Cruz.
has, but I saw this recently where yeah, the most like the lamest no effort jokes, those tend to have some malicious intent, just wanting to hurt people and put people down.
Yeah. And yeah, along those lines of unhealthy ways people use humor, I have had some patients that they use humor excessively and they use it to deflect and dodge from the question.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, like, are you depressed? Well, who's not depressed these
Yeah.
days? Oh! It's like, all right,
Going
yeah, but
going in for high fives.
yeah. I mean, I'll fist bump the guy, but I mean, we got to answer the question.
Yeah.
Like, are you depressed?
Yeah.
And so that is the thing too, where yes, it is classified as a mature defense mechanism, but I've also seen people use it in immature, unhealthy ways too. So yeah, it's tricky.
Uh, well, I've had a lot of laughs today. I think we usually do have
Yeah.
laughs. I will say this is one funny thing when I'm working on the videos to upload to like YouTube. YouTube will do a thing where it picks its own thumbnails. Like it'll like give you some options to use, and it's kind of fucked up. But I always think it's funny that every time we do an episode, it'll like come up with the thumbnails, and usually the thumbnails are you and I laughing or smiling, and then it'll be like, then the title of the episode will be like, blame capitalism for drug use. And it's just me and you with like the biggest smiles.
Little incongruence there. Yeah.
Understanding and incongruity. With that, thank you all, as always, for listening. Thank you, Mike, for the suggestion. Just thank you, everybody. Justin, I missed you, my friend. Let me remind everybody where you can find us. Apple Podcast, Spotify, apparently not Stitcher anymore. That was a podcast streaming service that I guess is closing down. But everywhere else, you can find our podcast. We are a member of the Spreaker Prime Network. Thank you, iHeartMedia, iHeartRadio, Spreaker for having us. If you use Apple Podcasts, please feel free to leave us a 5-star review and a comment if you would like. On Spotify, we'd love to see a 5-star review from you all. You can find us on social media at MillennialMHC on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I won't even mention Threads anymore because that shit is dead. But with all that, go laugh a little bit, go have some fun, go find some humor in your life, and take care of y'all mentals.